All right, welcome in, Jake Asman, Cole Thompson from Sports Illustrated, Texans beat writer with you. We are doing a live reaction after David Culley just met the media over Zoom for the second time as the Texans head coach. The first time, Cole, was his introductory press conference. This is only the second time he's been made available, so there's a lot to get into with what he said. Specifically, what he was asked about Deshaun Watson and how he continued to double down what has been the public stance from the Texans, that they are committed to Deshaun Watson and that he's their starting quarterback. So, Cole, let's obviously start there. What did you make of the answers that you got from David Culley when he was asked directly about Deshaun Watson?
I think the biggest thing I take away is if you listen to the Steve Wyche, Jim Trotter interview that they did maybe about 30 minutes before this press conference, it sounds completely different than how he's talking to the other media members. It is a completely different style of, well, if he wants to be here, he'll be here. And then it's no, Deshaun Watson is our starting quarterback. He is our guy. We are going to make him our quarterback. And that just feels like he is saying what I think a lot of people around the NFL are saying to one, and then what he's saying to others is to keep the fan base from, I really would say, eating him alive right now, in the sense of, oh, Deshaun Watson isn't going anywhere. Now, you and I both know this. There is a window right now as free agency is starting and tampering period is kind of going on that the Texans will be at an all-time high to listen to offers for a guy like Watson, 25 years old, coming off a statistically best season of his career, resetting the market with 33 touchdowns and leading the NFL in passing yards. But that market dwindles year in and year out after draft night on April 29th because of those first-round picks that we're hearing about, those 2 first-round picks from Miami, those 2 first-round picks from the New York Jets, 2 teams that are very interested in potentially acquiring Watson will no longer be there. And after that, you have to bet on where you trade him and where that value is in the draft because of the team is exponentially going to get better with a 25-year-old Pro Bowl quarterback under center. And that means that those draft picks that potentially would look like top 10 picks would probably actually be in the 20 range, would be in the 25 range, would be in that high-end back playoff team range because they have a playoff caliber quarterback in Watson, which means you kind of lose out on the value of a top-level pick. So I get where David Culley is coming from. There's 2 sides to every story. And the biggest one is, yeah, you want to make sure that you make your, city happy and that you do have the contingent and the most important position figured out. And that is quarterback. But at the same time, listen to how that Trotter and Wyche interview went 30 minutes before. It's very contingent that there is at least a possibility that Houston will be willing to move him. But at the same time, I'll give him this. That's not really on him. That's on Nick Caserio at this point. And the one thing I can't take away from this press conference is he knows his role. He understands I am the head coach. I am not the GM. That's a GM question. Go ask the GM that question.
So here's the big answer that I thought was very telling. So Culley is asked if Deshaun Watson is committed to the Texans. His response is, yes, he is. The reporter then follows up and says, how do you know? And his response was, he's a Houston Texan. And this is a tough spot for David Culley. There's no doubt. But that answer, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. There is no way Deshaun Watson is obviously committed to the Houston Texans. So here's the question that has to be asked. Is this just the public stance and that will change, as you alluded to, when we get closer to the draft and they could trade Deshaun and maximize his value, Cole? Or is this going to be their stance, that they will be dead set on not trading Deshaun and they'd be willing to answer all the questions from the media, deal with the backlash from the fan base, deal with some of the stuff that would come out from Watson's camp? Are they willing to play hardball with their one-time franchise quarterback?
Well, I think you and I both know this. Watson's camp has pretty much come out and said this could get ugly. And it's looking more down that, if we go down the winding road of this becoming a bloodbath, ugly ending, whether that ends with somehow Jack Easterby and the Texans organization moving on from Deshaun Watson, as in they leave the city of Houston, or Deshaun Watson leaves the city of Houston, because it can get ugly. But the comments like that feel like a bad Abbott and Costello punchline, if you really want to break it down, because of who's on first, what's on second, I don't know who's on third. Oh, he's a Texan. So how do you know he's committed? Well, because he's a Texan. Well, how do you know he's committed? Well, he's a Texan, so that means he must be committed. Yes, he did sign a 4-year, $156 million deal to be with the Texans until 2025. And Houston, if they really wanted to, could play hardball and say, okay, we're not trading you. We will lose money. I mean, we will lose money on this. There's no way that we will not lose money, but we will save some money if you decide right now, I'm going to retire because I don't want to play for you. And that really is the case. Houston then would own his rights as a player for the next 5 seasons. And if he does not play for 5 seasons, there's very few teams I think that are going to be out there going, oh, well, Deshaun Watson hasn't played since he was 25, so we're going to sign him to a massive deal. Yeah,
we're not even going down that path.
But that's my point, is that Houston can play hardball a little bit. Now, it does ruin his legacy with the franchise. It does ruin a relationship between what seemed less than 18 months ago to be a very healthy relationship between owner and player. But at the same time, Watson does have some power in this, just like the Texans have some power in this. He could potentially come back, say in September, do what Cam Chancellor did, come back and play, then get the deal that he wanted overall, because if he showed up and play, and maybe that does add to his value in the market. Houston doesn't want to trade him this year. Houston realizes he comes back and says, okay, I'm going to play because I want to, boost my value. He sets career numbers next year with a franchise that probably would be 1-15, 0-16 without him. And that maybe ups his value even more than what it already is. Personally, I would trade him right now. If I'm Houston, I would listen to every single offer that I could and get what I could to come back, because of this team with Nick Caserio and how he is restructuring these deals. They have some money to play with in free agency, but they're not contenders this year. There's no way that they're going to be in that contention status. And I would say anything other than 5 wins is actually a winning year from on paper of what we've seen from this Texans organization. So yeah, I would be calling offers right now, but same time, Texans don't have to do anything, but this is going to get ugly if they don't.
So here's the thing, right? And let's focus just more on the now, not 5 years. If they want to, really test the limits with Deshaun, what's the ultimate win for the Texans if they don't trade him by the draft? Like, you're never changing this guy's mind. Even if he shows up to camp, how motivated is he going to be? What's stopping him from pulling the old Jalen Ramsey, my back hurts, and not playing, and eventually, forcing a trade at some point? Like, if you're the Texans and you don't want to trade him, Cole, then you can't trade him until next offseason. And I don't think anyone trusts this team to do the quote-unquote right thing and hold on to him and deal with the potential backlash. So I agree with you. I think if you're going to trade him, you do it right now. You call the Jets, you call the Dolphins, you get those two teams to bid against one another and try and maximize his value, because I think he's always going to be valuable because he's Deshaun Watson. He's 25 years old. But I think there's a real point to be made here that his value will never be greater than what it is right now at this given point in time, coming off the year he came off of, and given the fact you have two teams that are division rivals picking 2nd and 3rd overall back-to-back in this year's draft.
Well, I think also what really makes this done is that Houston needs as many picks as possible because of of course, Laramie Tunsil trade from 2019. They do not have a 1st-round pick this year. They do not have a 2nd-round pick this year. Miami holds both. And that number 2 and number 3 pick will be so valuable because of the upside with these quarterbacks in the class. Just say that they do land a Tua Tagovailoa in the return. Well, you're at least going to give, I think, Tua 1 year to figure out if he is the guy, especially with another pretty substantial right now class in 2022 coming into the NFL draft next season with guys like Spencer Rattler from Oklahoma, Sam Howell from North Carolina. I think you could give Tua a year, so that adds more value to that number 2 or number 3 pick overall. So you may get Deshaun Watson traded to, say, the Jets for three 1st-round picks, a future, a 2nd-round pick this year, and maybe Sam Darnold, and you want to go with Darnold for just a year. You can then turn that number 2 pick into another 2 1st-round picks to, say, like a team like the Carolina Panthers, who are very interested in moving up to get a quarterback. So when you think about it, Deshaun Watson maybe goes for 4 overall picks and a proven player, but that doesn't mean Deshaun Watson goes for 4 overall picks and a proven player. That means that number 2 pick into 3 more picks. So that's now 7 picks that Deshaun Watson goes for. So there's value with moving up into the draft to start fresh. This is a team that has $23 million right now in salary cap space. This is a team that has a ton of potential to really reset the market, reset the franchise in multiple ways. And it does give you time to find out what you have at quarterback for years to come and build a roster to when you get a young quarterback there's already players on staff who are ready to help you win and be contingent now. And that's where I look at this deal. I don't think Houston needs to be going after, the number 2 pick with a brand new quarterback, because that doesn't really solve your problems. What I do think is, if you can get that number 2 or number 3 pick in a quarterback heavy class, you can trade away that pick, go with one of these younger guys still, a Sam Darnold who's 23, a Tua Tagovailoa who's 23, figure out what they are for a year and add more picks down the line to help build this roster into hopefully something contingent down the line in 2022 or 2023. So that's more so why I traded Deshaun Watson. Not because I want to start fresh with a quarterback, but because of I have so many holes in so many areas and I need to get better. And the only way I can get better is I have this asset that is so powerful right now. And I'm never going to be able to get this kind of deal, I think, again.
Cole Thompson, Sports Illustrated Texans beat reporter with me here. My name is Jake Asman. If you're watching us on Twitter and Periscope, thank you. If you're watching us on YouTube, we appreciate it. Please subscribe to the channel as we continue to react to David Culley's comments at his media availability that concluded about 30 minutes ago. Another big takeaway, Cole, from this press conference. David Culley asked about Jack Easterby and was asked if Easterby has a role in player personnel. His response to that question was, quote, Nick is the general manager. I'm the head coach. Jack is the vice president of football operations, which involves a bunch of things. He does a wonderful job. It's a multitude of responsibilities. He did not say yes or no directly to the question, though. Is Easterby involved in player personnel? Many people around the Texans fans, think he is. What's your take on that response from David Culley?
I feel like David Culley is playing very close to the line, and it's kind of like Morse code of help in some sort of way, because of, I think he's trying to say, I'm not going to come out and say he isn't, but if I'm not saying he is, I'm also not saying he isn't, which is exactly what I think you can kind of take away from that whole deal. But I do think that there is a kind of line with Culley, and where he's going to come in and where he's going to talk and where he's going to bring it up in the future. So anyone trying to kind of break out, you're going to have to do a lot of homework and a lot of digging to find out more about this team, because of, unlike Bill O'Brien, he's not wearing multiple hats in the organization. He's wearing one hat, and that hat is the head coach. Nick Caserio is wearing the GM hat. And, right now, Jack Easterby is wearing the vice president of player personnel hat. That's what he's wearing. He's wearing the vice president of football operations hat. They all know their roles and they all know where they sit, but that doesn't mean that outside of the public eye, they're not sitting in on other areas. And there are ties, of course, with Caserio and Easterby to where the personnel level would kind of fit in. Part of the reason that Nick Caserio is in Houston is because of Jack Easterby's love and respect for him for when they worked together in New England. Now, that's not to say that Caserio has not earned over the last 20 years a shot to be a GM, but knowing somebody in the door only gets you so far without having to pay back another favor down the line. So I do think that, yeah, maybe he is at least a little bit involved and his ear is in the way. But according to everything that I've said, everything that I've heard, everyone that I've spoken to, the one thing I can take away is that Nick Caserio makes the final deals. So at any minute, let's go back to the Duke Johnson deal. If Jack Easterby really likes Duke Johnson, he'll have a say in Duke Johnson staying on the team. If Nick Caserio wants to save $5 million and says, I don't really care if Duke Johnson's on the team, Nick Caserio will have the final say. So in a way, if Nick Caserio gets an offer that's blown out of the proportional water, I'm talking 5 first-round picks, 6 first-round picks for a guy like Watson, Easterby can say, well, hold up. We don't have a franchise quarterback now. Yeah, but we're never going to get 6 first-round picks again. I'm making this deal whether you like it or not. And Caserio has to deal with the consequences. Now, what happens after that? Happens after that. But I do think that there is a line that Easterby is on. And that line is, of course, teetering into player development.
Well, here's the thing, right? I think if you just look at Caserio's resume and just look at his accomplishments, his resume, he deserves to be a team's general manager running the football operations for a team. There's no doubt. I think what concerns the Texan fan is that Easterby is a holdover from the O'Brien regime. He was the interim GM. Why did they give him interim GM responsibilities when they could have just cleaned house and had other people just run the team for the final 12 weeks of last year's season? So I think there's a legit concern when you see, Easterby get on Cal McNair's plane and assist in the hiring of Caserio. Obviously, Caserio is a qualified general managing candidate, but there's a legitimate reason why Texans fans are concerned about Easterby's influence. Because if you really go back to everything that's happened to this team over the last year and a half, go back to, I believe it was April or May of 2019 when Easterby was hired, Brian Gaine gets fired, and everything from that point forward has basically been a disaster for this organization. So that is the mysterious Easterby factor in all this. And Culley will speak to the media. Nick Caserio will speak to the media. Nobody has heard from Jack Easterby, and it sounds like no one ever will hear from Jack Easterby publicly.
It feels like he's just kind of a myth. Like he's just kind of like, oh, we're gonna put the blame on him. And does he even exist? Is he real? Where is he? Because of legitimately at this point, everything we hear is Jack Easterby, but we don't hear Jack Easterby. We just hear of Jack Easterby. But I do want to go back to a quick point real fast that you brought up. How Jack Easterby boarded that plane with Cal McNair to go get Nick Caserio to be on the team. If Nick Caserio was the GM of the Houston Texans and the moves that he's made, which, by the way, I think he's done a fantastic job with the moves he's made recently, the restructuring of the Brandon Cooks deal, the release of the Nick Martin deal, bringing in a proven veteran in Justin Britt, saving up a ton of salary cap space. If these moves were done and Easterby was not in the building, I think we'd be looking at this in a whole different contingency. Or if another GM was in the building or Caserio was a GM of another team and he makes these deals, are we talking about Nick Caserio in this way? It's because of there is a tie-in. There was a tie-in with Brian Gaine. There was a tie-in with Bill O'Brien. There was a tie-in with Jack Easterby, and there was a tie-in with Bill O'Brien. And now there's a tie-in with Nick Caserio and the tie-in with Jack Easterby. So no matter what, there's a tie-in somewhere in this entire process. And that's where I think people are starting to see, well, we just watched this entire thing go up in smoke with these two not working out. We then watched a coach who was a proven winner. And the one thing that he will more than likely be remembered for is the 24-0 debacle in Arrowhead Stadium in 2020 just go up in smoke. How can we trust at this point that this is not going to go up in smoke? And now more than that, we no longer have our starting wide receiver in Will Fuller, who was not franchise tagged. He will hit the open market. And a guy who Deshaun Watson personally came out and said right before the hiring of Nick Caserio, yeah, I really hope that they bring him back. Where does all this fit? And more than anything, on top of all that is you hear, oh, I haven't heard anything from outside of the public eye that Deshaun Watson doesn't want to be here. All right. Which side is lying? Is Deshaun Watson's camp blowing this out of proportion? Or is David Culley really trying to keep his mouth quiet on the situation because they're just making sure that he is not made available?
David Culley is in an impossible spot. He inherited this mess. It seems like he's kind of just like a placeholder here. He had nothing to do with Easterby. He had nothing to do with Cal McNair. So he's in a tough spot. But I do think going up there at the podium earlier and basically trying to like diminish or downplay or pretend like Deshaun Watson is, singing Kumbaya with everyone still, I think that's misguided. I don't think that will work, but time will tell what the Texans do. Let's take a couple questions from those that are watching either on Twitter, on my Twitter account at Jake Asman, or over my YouTube page. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, you can write in your question or comment on the side, and we'll bring it on the air. And same thing if you write it on the Periscope/Twitter portion of the broadcast. This one comes from TJ Decker. Jake, realistically, do you think the Jets are getting him? I'm assuming the him is Deshaun Watson, of course.
No, they're getting Jack Easterby, man. They're getting Jack Easterby. That's who they want.
Yeah, I don't think the Jets are looking to trade for a Whitney Merciless or anything like that. So, of course, TJ, with the Jets and Watson, I will continue to maintain my stance that if he is traded before the draft, if the Texans decide they are going to move Deshaun Watson, I still think the Jets are the favorites to get him. It doesn't mean they will, but I think if there is a team that's in position, or there's not a team, I should say, that's in better position to acquire Deshaun Watson than the Jets. I don't think it takes this 4 first-round pick Quinn Williams package. I think it would take 3 ones. And if you're a Jet fan, here's the trade-off you make mentally to kind of understand the deal. You're swapping your second overall pick for Deshaun Watson and Jamal Adams. That's the trade. 3 ones, throw in some other picks, whatever. You recoup a second-round pick when you trade Sam Darnold, and off you go. You got 19 picks over the next 2 years. It's time to be aggressive. So, long answer to your question, TJ. I think if he's traded before the draft, it's the Jets, but I'm still not fully convinced. The Texans are definitely going to move him before the draft, and anything could happen if they decide not to trade him when the first round starts on April 29th.
I would go right now. The Jets would be the team. That would be the team where he would end up. He wanted to work with Robert Saleh. That was a consolation guy who was always in the back of his mind. That was a player. That was someone who had worked with the Texans in the past. That was a name that was a big time player coach. And that's something that a lot of people I don't think understand. There are player coaches out there that make teams better because they want to go to them. Sean McDermott was a player's coach as the defense coordinator in Carolina. And then he built a roster in Buffalo that was super talented in year one and only got better over time. You look at a guy like Ron Rivera and what he's done in Carolina and what he's done in Washington in 1 year. One of the most famous player coaches, someone who takes value of people, someone who takes value of a person's opinion. Saleh is right there. And a lot of New York Jets fans are excited to see if anyone from San Francisco and that defense is coming over this upcoming offseason to join them. There's 6 defensive players from San Francisco, all of whom said, I would consider going to the Jets. I love what Coach Saleh did. And that's something to look into. So having that, I think, does add value. Having an offense like Mike LaFleur, who is very similar to what Kyle Shanahan does. And everyone's talking about, oh, if Kyle Shanahan got his hands on Deshaun Watson, it would just be unfair to the NFL. Well, what if Mike LaFleur is just the exact same guy and he gets his hands on Deshaun Watson? Is that not unfair? Is that not uncommon? And then you look at the second thing, and probably the most biggest thing, the salary cap. How much salary cap New York has this upcoming offseason? They are not going to be able to go after a guy like Allen Robinson unless they trade for him, but they still could go after a guy like Kenny Golladay to be their number one receiver. They still have a couple of other options out there, like a Will Fuller, like a Curtis Samuel. They could go out and they can get a couple of probably low-end offensive linemen or defensive players, and they still would have an ample amount of money left to go get their quarterback. Now, you said 3-1s gets this deal done. I think it would be a little bit more. I think the 3-1s 100% is in there. I would say probably two 3s.
Sure.
And maybe like a 5th.
Yeah, I meant 3-1s as like that's the starting point. You'll throw some mid-round picks in there. But the thing is, like, people talk about the Jets like they'd have to give up everything to get them. They have 19 draft picks over the next 2 years. They have 9 picks in the first 3 rounds over the next 2 years. So, yeah, it's going to cost a lot to get Deshaun Watson. But you went 2-14 last year, and you're swapping out the second overall pick for a quarterback who's 25 years old with a cap hit of only $10 million next year. So if you're the Jets, you're not just bringing in Deshaun Watson to win next year. You're thinking that you now have your guy for at least the next 10 to 12 years at the minimum. And that's why if I'm the Jets and I'm Joe Douglas, I don't really care what it takes. Within reason, of course. I'm not trading 4-1s in Quinn Williams, but I would do 3-1s and a bunch of 2s because I think he's that good, and that's the move to make. And that's why I believe the Jets are still in the power position here when it comes to a potential Watson trade.
And I think more on top of all that as well, you also have a few years before that cap really gets high. $10 million this year. I think it's 17.2 next year, which is still pretty low for a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, especially with deals that we've just seen where $75 million is immediately going to Dak Prescott before he even takes a snap this upcoming season. $66 million guaranteed. I mean, so there are definitely deals that can be done over the next 2 years. So the window of opportunity right now is huge. Now, I bring this question to you straight up. If this is the deal on the table, do you do it? All 4 first-round picks over the next 2 years. So Seattle's 2 and your 2 and 2 2s for Deshaun Watson. Do you get the deal done?
I would do it. I'm still kind of reluctant into thinking that it would take that much, though. As great of a player as Deshaun is, I think Joe Douglas is not going to bid against himself. And the Jets giving the Texans that second overall pick is more valuable than anything the Dolphins can give you, more valuable than what the Niners or Panthers could give you or the Bears. So I think the fact that that second overall pick continues to increase in value because of the Zach Wilson hype train we're seeing right now, I think it would only take 3-1s and some other picks to get it done. I could be dead wrong, but Cole, to answer your question, if that's what it took to get Deshaun Watson, hell yeah. If I'm the Jets, I think you got to do it.
I think it'd be interesting. I definitely think this year would be really interesting because of that number 33 pick is also going to Houston. So they would have the number 1 pick in round 2 because of, keep in mind, every year it switches. So Jacksonville holds 34, even though they were the number 1 team with the number 1 pick. So New York, Houston would start the second round. And what's crazy is Zach Wilson's agent is Bill O'Brien's agent. And Justin Fields' agent is Deshaun Watson's agent. So if neither one of them say, if this deal gets done and then David Mulugeta gets on the phone and goes, hey, listen, I am not coming back here. I am not dealing with this. Does that make that pick even more valuable if you are all sold on Fields as a team? Like if Carolina is sold on Fields as being their next guy and they're potentially moving up, Houston then could really fleece the deal done and go, hey, you want this done? You're giving me 79 this year. You're giving me number 8, and you're giving me your first round pick in 2022 and your third round pick in 2022. So then again, that's 4 more picks done. So that's 10 picks total for Deshaun Watson. And at that point, it's almost like you're not restarting, but you definitely are in a very good spot, kind of like the Jets are right now with 19 picks in the next 2 years to get this deal done. I do think, though, and TJ's bringing up a question, if you had a percentage on Watson being traded before the draft, teams can't wait to trade after because their offseason plans change tremendously. I would go right now, it's about 50-50. That would be my contingency right now. I think what really is going to matter is bring this question back up when I would say probably after free agency is kind of like majorly set. Like when you know what these deals are, like how much the Jets will pay for a guy like Will Fuller, how much the Jets will pay for a defensive lineman, how much the Jets would pay for a low-end offensive, an offensive guard. What those deals do, that's when I think that this also comes into mind. I think teams doing that kind of plays a factor into it.
Well, the thing with the Jets, too, they have so much money and so many teams don't, that I don't think any signing the Jets make would impact, what they're going to do at the quarterback spot. Like, regardless who the quarterback is, they need better receivers. They need to improve their offensive line. So I think the Jets will be aggressive improving the team, whether the quarterback's Wilson, Darnold, Fields, or hopefully, if I get my way, Cole, Deshaun Watson. We'll take a couple more questions here, and then I want to put you on the spot to get your big picture takeaway. Let's take one here from Paul Klein. He writes in 3 firsts from the Jets, massive overpay, pick 2, 34, and next year's 1. That's what Paul would offer. I don't think 3 firsts is a massive overpay, Paul, because I'll tell you why. You offer the second overall pick. You could trade your 1 next year and Seattle's 1, or Seattle's 23rd this year. And if it's 3 1s to get Deshaun, I mean, you basically swapped, your own pick and Jamal Adams for Deshaun Watson. I would make that trade any day of the week. I think every Jet fan would as well. So I don't think that is an overpay here. This one is from GMB Jeff. Jeff, we got to work on that username, my friend. Stop sleeping on Mims and Jamison Crowder. Yes, the Jets actually do have some capable receivers. Denzel Mims was criminally underused with Adam Gase last year. I think in his second year, if he stays healthy, he could be a factor. Crowder, very reliable slot receiver, but they need a number 1, which is why they're linked to Kenny Golladay, Will Fuller. We'll see what happens with Allen Robinson. They could use the draft to improve at that position as well. Cole, you do a lot of draft coverage. It's a very good wide receiver draft. The Jets will be aggressive there too.
Yeah, they will. Listen, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I had Mims higher on my big board than a lot of other people did. I very much like Denzel Mims. I think Denzel Mims is a really talented player. I think that he has so much upside. And in an offense like that, I definitely think that they could use him. I do think that when you look at the Jets, if they were to keep that number 23 pick, they have to go cornerback. They have to go get a guy like a J.C. Horn from South Carolina, maybe a Greg Newsome who's rising up draft boards. He was a guy for Northwestern who had a really solid year. But I do think that when you look at this overall, draft class, there's definitely a lot of pieces for the Jets to add. I personally think that, though, when you look at the first question, the 234 and next year's 1, here's the reality of it. You would have gotten that if Bill O'Brien was the GM. You're not getting that with Nick Caserio, who 1 has 20 years of experience in the front office and 2 has 20 years of experience in the AFC East. You don't think he's going to try to get something big out of that deal for a team that he used to go against week in and week out with Tom Brady? So, yeah, I mean, again, I think that why you also look at a reason why Kenny Golladay and Allen Robinson are tied to the Jets over someone like Will Fuller is because they have a player like Mims on the roster, and they don't need that vertical presence with a coach who knows how to use them in a Mike LaFleur. I do think, though, when you also look at that other question for what it would take to cost them, yeah, I would say it costs way more than that, mainly because of Caserio needs to walk away at somewhat of a winner in his first year as a GM.
All right, a couple other questions to hit on here before we wrap up. Fred Hall writes in, Is Watson willing to go to the Bears? Fred, I think Watson just wants out of Houston. If the Bears make an offer, I think he had no problem waiving the no trade to go to Chicago.
My biggest thing with this is, I think he has no problem waiving the trade to go to Chicago either. What my problem is that the Bears don't have a lot to offer. And here's the other thing, and I think a lot of people don't understand this, and I do a lot of different, I talk to a lot of different people, and there was a person that I spoke to that said, if the Texans were smart, they would just go ahead and pick players from that defense on who they would add. Okay, well, I also want draft capital, and there's a lot of players who I don't want to pay. So Roquan Smith, I'd have him for 2 years, and if he doesn't like the system, that the cover linebacker, he's going to be gone. Jalen Johnson, he only has 3 years left on his deal because he was a second-round pick. He's going to be gone. Eddie Jackson, he's got 3 years left on his deal. If he doesn't like it in Houston, he's going to be gone. So I need to be able to have these guys that can build for a while, and the number 20 pick isn't worth it. The number 20 pick alone is worth it, and neither is 20 and 50. So Houston would have to be able to get a multitude of picks and some players. And at that point, the Bears would be fleeced out of a lot of picks and some players to where is Watson in a better situation? Maybe in a personality-wise he is, but on a team-wise, I would say in the NFC North, not really. No, I would not say he's in a better situation.
That's why I don't think anywhere other than, once again, the Jets and the Dolphins make sense for Deshaun. Because any trade Nick Caserio makes, he's a GM that has a 6-year deal. He's here for the long haul. He's going to want draft capital, and I just don't think
as Chicago, he should.
Yeah, I just don't think Chicago has enough. Jet Sirius writes in on Periscope. Thank you for watching the stream over Periscope, Jet Sirius. Do you guys believe Brian Flores when he says Tua's their guy? If so, Jets should be able to get a fair deal. I believe the Dolphins will be in on Deshaun Watson, but I think the fact that the Jets have the second overall pick will end up trumping any offer Miami makes. Plus, I think when it comes down to it, Joe Douglas is not just acquiring Deshaun Watson to make him his quarterback. He's acquiring Deshaun Watson to try and keep him away from the other team in your own division, and a division that still has Josh Allen and a division that still has Bill Belichick in it. So the Jets just cannot allow Deshaun to get traded inside the AFC East to the Miami Dolphins.
I think what's going to be interesting, though, with this is the other thing that I don't think enough people are talking about is this past offseason, the Dolphins went out and they hired Tua's quarterback coach from his high school level and from his off seasons to become their quarterback's coach. So there's a tie there that they believe that Tua has the ability to see a bigger upside in 2021. You also got to realize they finished 27th in rushing. They didn't have a running back go over 600 rushing yards. They didn't have a receiver that really was healthy consistently. Devontae Parker at this point in his career has proven to be a high-end number 2 instead of a number 1. So they have a lot of needs that they got to go after, and they have the number 3 pick, but they also have pick number 18 in a pretty loaded receiver class. Now also that they got Isaiah Wilson from the Tennessee Titans, they may consider what he's going to be as a former first rounder who has, at least 3 years left on his rookie deal to see if they could possibly move Robert Hunt into guard, play him at the right tackle role, see if that would work alongside of what they have at left tackle with Austin Jackson. I see Tua as potentially being the guy, but the biggest thing of all is if you are the Jets and you have all this cap space, the biggest thing left that you have to do is you have to hit on your quarterback. And in a division with Bill Belichick, who I do think is going to have a bounce back year because there's going to be a lot of healthy players and a lot more players opting back in, and they only finished 7-9 this year in the AFC East. And Josh Allen, who I was always high on. I'm going to sit here and go right now. I love Josh Allen. He was my QB1 in 2018. I am so glad that I stuck behind that and I never gave up on him. But what he's done with Brian Dable coming back, with Ken Dorsey coming back, with Sean McDermott coming back, still on his rookie deal, they still have some money that can go fix that defense. You need to go get a quarterback. And if you do not believe in any of these guys reaching the same level as Deshaun Watson, you can't allow him to go to Miami. You have to allow him to come to to come to New York.
10 seconds. Rapid fire. Deshaun Watson gets traded to which team if he gets traded at all?
I'd be the New York Jets. They have way too much draft capital, and it allows Houston to potentially move back and add more draft capital to rebuilding this team a lot better.
Going off of that, if Watson is traded to the Jets, the week 1 starting quarterback for the Houston Texans is who?
I would go with Ryan Fitzpatrick. I do think that Fitzpatrick would be coming back in, or I would go with Tyrod Taylor because of pass game coordinator Pep Hamilton's role and what he has done with Taylor last season in Los Angeles. I think it'd be a really, really good fit.
Guys, Cole Thompson is excellent covering the Texans for Sports Illustrated. Make sure you look him up on Twitter. At Mr. Cole Thompson is where you could find him. Thank you to everyone who engaged with this live stream, reacting to the comments David Culley made about Deshaun Watson at his media availability. So you can get Cole on Twitter at Mr. Cole Thompson. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Jake Asman. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for tuning in. We're trying to grow this page, so I'd appreciate it if you please subscribe and tell your friends, of course, as well. Plenty more Texans and Jets content to come throughout the offseason. Cole, this was a ton of fun, man. I know you got to go write and cover all the comments made at the presser, so thanks for hopping on this with me.
Anytime, Jake.
We'll take a break, and we're not coming back because I'm not on the radio show, so I'm just gonna end it right here. Thanks, everybody.